Welcome back. This is Dr. Steven Sears, and you're listening to Heal the Burn. There's a phrase I've heard more than once in medicine. You can't have it both ways. You can't care deeply and stay emotionally well. You can't want to help people and protect your own time. You can't love your job and feel burned out. I know I've certainly felt this way. I thought I had to pick a lane. Be all in or protect myself. Show up fully or draw that hard line. I remember coming home from clinic one day feeling completely spent. Not just tired, but really burned out. I felt stuck, like I had no options. Like I'd built something that now owned me. I was the only breadwinner at home. I still had to provide for my family. My wife had sacrificed so much so I could get to where I was. I also knew my long-term patients really did care about me. They trusted me as their doctor, and yet I still couldn't see a way forward. There was no light at the end of this tunnel. I remember thinking, I just have to make it to vacation. But even that felt hollow, like a temporary pause would change anything. Then my coach at the time said something that really stopped me in my tracks. She asked, "What if you could feel burned out and appreciated at the same time?" I remember laughing. It felt silly. That didn't fit the story I was telling myself. In my mind, if I was appreciated, I shouldn't feel burned out. And if I were burned out, then none of it mattered. But that question lingered. What if both could be true? It wouldn't fix the burnout, wouldn't fix the system. But it opened up a crack in my thinking that I hadn't seen before inside what I had thought was an open and shut case. That space is where something shifted for me. And that shift made room for hope, which is something that was missing for me. Today, I want to talk about that word, and, how it challenges automatic beliefs, how it softens the grip of either or. Sometimes it's the smallest words that really flip our thinking. My guest today is Dr. Kelley Aurand. Kelley is the Chief Medical Information Officer at Legacy Health in Portland, Oregon, where she brings together her background as a physician with her passions for system thinking, innovation, and people-centered leadership. She is someone I admire for her honesty, her insight, and experience, both professionally and her personal story. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when we stop trying to choose one truth and instead make space for more than one thing to be real at once. Let's get into it. Kelley, thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, Steve. I'm so happy to have this conversation.
Wondering if you could take me back to the beginning. What first pulled you into deciding you wanted to have a career in medicine?
When I went to college, I did not think that I would go into medicine. I went to college thinking I was going to go into research of some sort. And it wasn't until a college advisor said, "For the research you want to do, you're going to need to have an MD." And I very blindly said, "Great, sign me up. I love science. I like people. Sounds great." It wasn't until I got into about third year of medical school when you actually start to interact with people that I realized this is not a great fit for me. That I love the medicine. I loved the work that we do, didactics in the labs and at school, and having to deal with people, even though I really like people and I'm a friendly person and I care about people. The act of performing medicine was not at all what my expectation was. And so, even in medical school, I had thoughts of quitting, dropping out, doing something different, but I know I'd come so far and quite honestly paid so much money for my education, and there was no way I was going to be able to pay it back without completing this trajectory and being a physician. So I got through med school, I got through residency, and when I say I got through it, I literally mean I got through it. There was very little joy in it for me. And I started working right out of residency at a primary care clinic, which we opened. So I got a chance to establish this new clinic with two other colleagues. And right off the bat, I was completely overwhelmed with how hard it is to be a full-time primary care physician. I felt that people were trying to take advantage of me and that people were very entitled It's a very thankless job much of the time. So again, my expectation of what I thought medicine and being a doctor would be really was vastly different than my lived experience. So really right off the bat in my professional career, I was overwhelmed and honestly burned out. And I had a really traumatic experience with a patient and violence in the workplace. And I knew I had to do something different, that I could not be a full time primary care physician. And so that's when I found informatics and was able to combine my medical knowledge with more of a technical component of medicine behind the scenes. It really ushered me into a leadership position, which I've excelled at. And I've got to make a lot of really great changes for our system on behalf of our provider colleagues, which ultimately serves patients. And so when I go back to thinking about my whole career trajectory, I'm so happy that I still get to use my knowledge to help people. And this is just a much better fit for me than being a full-time doctor.
Uh, at what point did you start thinking about leadership, sort of the branch that became chief medical information officer? How did that happen?
I have always found myself in a position of leadership, like back to my high school days, right? Like I was involved in student government and I was leading clubs and I was in sports and I was always kind of stepping into that leadership position. And I think a lot of that is just personality trait. Um, some people might say I'm bossy. I would counter that I'm a leader. So I think it was pretty natural for me to step into a leadership position, but it definitely took me years to get there within our system. I work in a health system or a community health system, really like medium large in the Northwest, and so there's a lot of working parts in the system, and I happen to be under a really great mentor who saw that I was struggling and was able to bring me into the fold into a leadership position. And eventually, I worked up to the current position that I'm in as CMIO.
Yeah, that's really great. Was there a time that you ever felt pulled, maybe between being a physician to take care of patients and doing the informatics, or even moving into leadership? Was that ever a tough thing for you?
Yeah, and it still is a tough thing for me, honestly.
Hmm.
I remember very clearly when I was a resident physician and one of my attendings who I really, really admired. Um, we had this conversation about how medicine needs more primary care physicians, that we need more people to be altruistic in the practice of medicine and to take person centered care of our patients. And that what we don't need are, people that are doing more individualized or specialized types of things or part-time physicians, right? And so that that sense of obligation
Hmm.
stuck with me and it
Hmm.
still sticks with me to some degree. I know there's a physician shortage. I know that we're short primary care physicians. We have the longest wait to see a primary care physician in the Pacific Northwest than anywhere in the country. So I still feel that draw that I need to be seeing patients more. And I recognize that the work that I'm doing as an informaticist in this leadership position helps my provider colleagues to take care of patients, more patients, to take better care of patients, that I'm having a profound impact on the ability to care for people. And so every time I start to feel that draw that I'm not doing enough in medicine, that I'm not using my degree to the full potential, I stop and I think, but what else am I doing?
So a lot of us in medicine live inside this belief that we have to choose, that we're either strong or we're struggling. Have you ever felt stuck in that kind of either or thinking yourself?
I feel like my whole professional career is an example of thinking that I would have to do one thing or another, and then realizing multiple things can exist at the same time. That it's not all or nothing thinking. It is not black and white. And when I started to back off on clinical medicine and take on a more administrative role, I really had to reconcile with the fact that I can be a practicing physician seeing patients in clinic and I can do all of these other great things as a leader to help my colleagues, that I didn't have to do them either or, that I didn't have to be 100% a physician or 100% an administrator. And that in some ways, combining those things actually was more beneficial in the end.
Does the concept of a work-life balance, kind of related to what you just said, does that work into the same kind of thinking for you?
Honestly, I don't really understand this concept of work life balance, but let me tell you why. I have a really hard time shutting off my brain when I'm in different situations. So I have a hard time shutting off my work brain when I'm at home. And I have a hard time um, uh, when great ideas come to me about something at work and I'm at home, I'm not going to just shut that down. I'm going to think about it and I'm going to explore it, or I'm going to write it down and save it for later. So I think that for many of us, there's this constant crosstalk in our brain, and it doesn't really matter what environment we're in. And for a long time, I tried to really, really separate my work life from my home life. So I would have a rule that when I got home, I left work at work and I would be 100% focused on home. And I found myself always being drawn from that and then feeling guilty about it. And so, just in the past 5 years or so, I've realized that some of my best ideas about work things come to me when I'm at home. And maybe it's because I'm more relaxed, or maybe it's because I'm let myself, my creative brain kind of roam more free than I do when I'm more structured at work. And so, I'm learning to embrace that and recognize it and then set it aside for a time that I might have more time to actually think and explore that. So if I'm at home, that's fine. And I'm also, I also need to recognize that I'm a mom and a wife and a daughter and all of these other things. And so you have to prioritize all of those things. But I don't beat myself up anymore for thinking about work things when I'm at home.
What helped start you to loosen that sort of instead of or belief that it has to be this way or that way, that it could possibly be both?
When I was really struggling and I was at one of my lowest professional points, I started receiving professional coaching from a physician. And it was really through this coaching interaction and talking through a lot of how I was feeling about my professional self that I started to realize, and my coach started to teach me that you can have both things, that two things can exist at the same time, even if they seem to be polar opposites. And so, really sitting with that and thinking about how that would apply to my life was really, really meaningful for me. And so, I have worked with a professional coach for years. And that's one thing that has really been super helpful, has been to be able to reflect how I'm feeling or what I'm struggling with, and to talk through those things with someone who's not in my everyday life, right? It's not therapy,
Mm-hmm.
but it helps to reconcile many of the feelings that we have towards our professional and personal selves. She just reflects back to me what I've said.
It's like
And
talking to a mirror.
but you hear it in a different way when someone else says it back to you.
I'm wondering if you could tell me what it means to you now to be able to see work and home be coexisting in terms of things that happen in your life and things that you can enjoy at any one time. It's not that you're a great person at work or you're a great person at home. You sound like you've substituted that word with and.
I feel like I have a lot more freedom, especially creative freedom, to just think what is coming to me and to be able to explore that and not feel guilty that I'm not having those ideas in a certain setting. And so instead of focusing on what I'm maybe not doing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to focus on what I am doing. And then just as recognizing those things that are coming up, um, I'm able to kind of acknowledge that that's something to act on later, and I can put it aside and it's still there for me later, but I don't feel a sense of guilt or shame that I'm thinking about work when I'm at home. Um, and so it's really kind of given me permission to express many parts of myself,
Hmm.
regardless of the time of day or the location that I am.
Do you find yourself slipping into that either or mindset sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, especially on when I'm away, like a concentrated time away, like a vacation. Sometimes I'll put more pressure on myself to really be fully present on vacation, which is a wonderful thing to do. And then if I find my mind, something creative coming up for me that relates to something that's not related to family or vacation, I try to put it away. Um, but then, also coming back to the fact that we're human and we can have many different parts of us. I still have strict lines though, Steve. Don't get me wrong. I do not do email on vacation. In fact, my out of office message says, I am away for this period of time. Please don't send me an email. Consider contacting me when I return, right? Because I don't want that when I'm away. We all
Absolutely.
need time away.
Yes.
But I think that there's a big difference between having a conscious effort to not log into the computer and not do the kind of daily grinds of our job versus allowing your brain to be creative no matter where.
What would you say to the people who I've run into along the way who say that if they don't work their inbox while they're gone, then their patients won't get taken care of the way that they would want them to be taken care of, and they're just going to have to come back to a whole mess when if they were taking care of it along the way, they are more relaxed about their stuff having been taken care of while they were gone.
I think that that is their truth. And I think that that is a systems problem, right? We talk a lot about resilience. And so part of me wants to say, well, if you were resilient enough, you could just, ignore those thoughts, ignore your in basket, come back and do your work, even if it means you have to work 18 hours a day to get caught
Hmm.
up with that, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what society tells us is that when you're gone, you should be gone, and when you're at work, you should be at work. And so what I hear that person saying is that they really kind of struggle um, with those feelings of having to work to get caught up. If the systems were set up appropriately, our patients would be taken care of even when we're on vacation, and we wouldn't have a huge amount of workload to come back to that was a huge backload. So a lot of these problems that we feel in the practice of medicine, as far as being overburdened with work, it's all true, and it's because the system is not set up to properly care for patients when their personal physician is away, right? We still think of having a personal physician in many ways. And many of us as physicians identify with that instead of maybe letting go and letting our partners or our colleagues help if that's how your system is set up. And I really firmly believe it should be.
So in your current leadership style, Kelly today is a leader. How do you hold space for and for the people that you lead?
I have really tried to replace my vocabulary so that when I want to say but, I say and. So if someone is, if we're having a conversation and I want to say yes, but I try really hard to say yes and, because two things can coexist. So
Do
your
you
truth could be true and my truth could be true. And we have to find a way to meet in the middle instead of having one or the other be completely true.
do you talk about that explicitly? Do you say this is what I'm doing, or do you just try to model it?
I don't think I've ever talked explicitly to the people that I lead that that's my intention, but I do often find myself saying, yes, and both of these things could be true.
I think that also opens up that space, right? Where instead of there being black or white, there's this whole gray area. And if you weren't even thinking of that, you can't creatively solve that problem.
And we get to decide together. That's the thing, right? So the gradient of the gray is something that we get to collaboratively work on. And that's one of the things I really love about being a leader.
So there's a lot of pressure in medicine to resolve things quickly, to fix it and be done and be right. What have you learned about holding tension instead of rushing to a resolution?
In medicine, there's many times, especially in outpatient primary care that you and I practice, there's many times that time is one of the only healers. And when someone is sitting across from you expecting you to fix it as the physician, it's really hard to remove yourself from that equation and to help your patient understand that sitting with the problem might be the best answer. That really there are things that we could do, but it may actually be more harmful than beneficial.
And I
I
think what
can't.
I'm hearing you say is that, there's a real power in just letting it sit, letting it be there, and realizing that it's uncomfortable. And we could have a lot of other ways that we could look at.
Sure. I think there's always a desire to not be uncomfortable and to not sit in the silence. And so just by recognizing and calling it out, even if it's within my own brain, just thinking, oh, this is uncomfortable silence, sometimes that's really helpful. And people love to fill in the silence, and sometimes they have their own answers. And so sometimes when you're silent, you let people come to their own conclusions and then you can help support them.
That's great. Before we wrap up, is there anything you wish more physicians knew about what's possible when we stop trying to pick one truth and start living inside of and?
I want physicians to know that there's not one way to do things, that you can be many different versions of yourself at the same time, and that it's okay to do that, even if that means you're not practicing medicine full time. I want physicians to know that there is help available to them to work through a lot of these questions, and that they are not alone if they are feeling like medicine is no longer their calling or they want to do something different. I felt completely alone when I had those thoughts. And it wasn't until I started doing coaching that I realized there was a whole nother world that was available to me. And I gave myself permission to lean into that and think about what that might look like.
For someone listening who might be burned out now, or feeling stuck, or emotionally unavailable, is there a small thing you could recommend that they might try this week just to open up a little bit of space?
I think there's a lot of power in acknowledging that you're having those feelings and that you're not alone and that it's okay. I thought you were going to tell the story of when we first started working together and how we got around that or how we got through it.
Hey, let's talk about that for a minute. So, why don't you give me a memory here that when we first met?
So, Steve, you and I had been primary care docs in the same health system for years, but like in parallel. You were in a different clinic than I was. And so I'd kind of known who you were and had heard your name, and you work with a lot of people that I'm close friends with. So we were kind of in overlapping circles for a long time, but didn't ever like really, interface very much or know each other. And when COVID hit and we had to all of a sudden transition to video visits, you were medical director of telehealth, and I was in informatics at the time. And our system hadn't really figured out video visits before the pandemic. You guys were working on it, your team was working on it, and the technology wasn't great, and there weren't a lot of resources available to help make it better. There were just a lot of roadblocks before the pandemic, and then the pandemic really opened up many of those things so that we could really kind of rush getting this technology to our providers so that they could take care of patients, right? And it, I think you'll agree, wasn't going very well. It was slow, and you didn't have maybe the best partnerships with the people that could have helped to make it fast tracked or better. And so the leadership at our organization asked informatics to step in and to help roll it out faster.
Yes.
And so when you and I first got to work together closely, My recollection, which might be different than yours, is I kind of forced myself in and said, we need to make this great now, and we can't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. So let's go. And steamrolled it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Did not necessarily make many friends in that process. And so you and I had kind of a tough beginning, right? There were, I think, hurt feelings there, which we have since worked through, and I've apologized. And now we've kind of come through several years later to this great place where you've moved all the way across the country and we still talk on a regular basis, right? And have this great relationship. And we've been able to kind of keep our personal relationship really special. And I really value that about you.
Oh, that's so sweet. I learned coaching from you. So I think that my own journey from burnout to a bit less burnout, it was actually a result of us having met, whether it was, comfortable conversations or not. And your health system got a video visit platform and they did okay. Um, it's fascinating though, because how would I have ever known that our professional relationship would turn out to be probably one of the more profound things that's ever happened to me, as a means of making things better. And that's what I value about you so much, is that you've always been interested in physician well-being. And I hadn't really thought of it as a concept. I knew that I wasn't happy. I knew that I was feeling, what I later learned is burned out. But I didn't have a way to put any words to that.
And I bet you felt alone.
Oh yeah.
I know that I did when I discovered what burnout and the difference between that and well-being was. I felt completely alone. Like, how could I be a physician and have these feelings? There's just something about it that is completely against what society tells us physicians should be.
I absolutely agree with you. You've gone through the school, you've gone through the training, so therefore you are a great doctor. And all of these other things that we have to do that aren't sort of system level things, or even patient interaction things that are difficult, it doesn't take that into account.
Yeah.
You can't forget that you're a person and you have
You're
feelings.
human. Yeah.
You are human. And that is great. So just as an aside, when Kelley and I talk, we frequently will end our sentences with and.
And.
Hey, I want to thank you for sharing your story and reminding us that we're not limited to one version of ourselves. Sometimes we're burned out and committed, frustrated and hopeful, tender and strong. And it's making space for those contradictions that we start to feel human again. If today's episode stirred something in you, share it with a colleague. If you're holding something heavy, I hope this gives you just a little more room to breathe. I'd like to thank my guest, Dr. Kelley Aurand, CMIO, Legacy Health System in Portland, Oregon, for sharing her experiences with us. This is Dr. Stephen Sears. Thank you for listening to another episode of Heal the Burn.